We do have this latest installment on this rescue mission that continues there in Sabie Mpumalanga as suspected illegal miners are being brought to surface at the abandoned mine. So just to bring you up to speed, if you've just joined us, 3 bodies have been retrieved thus far. 1 from Zimbabwe, 1 is a national from Botswana, and several others were rescued while we were still with Nhlamulo Mabasa there. And we do know that one of them is a Lesotho national born in 1998. Another one is a Mozambican national born in 2002. The others who were rescued earlier on, they were seen being taken into a police van live here on SABC News on those visuals. And they've spent about 2 weeks without food or even water. Police and SANDF members are at the scene carrying out this particular operation, and they're using just 1 rope in order to be able to try and just bring above ground over 100 suspected illegal miners. Now, some of those who have resurfaced say that they were forced to this mine for gold under dangerous conditions. They say they were looking for work, but then found themselves going underground without their consent, because they had guns, as they claim, that were put at them and forced to go down. Let's speak now to mining expert David van Wyk, who's joining us live now. David, good evening to you, and thank you so much for your time. Firstly, we're still dealing with what's taking place in Stilfontein. Now there's an operation that's currently taking place in the Sabie in Mpumalanga, where we understand that just roughly around 105 now, possibly, of suspected illegal miners would be underground. Your reaction to this latest incident?
Well, I think that the situation in the Sabie area on the escarpment is very problematic. Those are the oldest goldfields in South Africa, and those are also the most dangerous mines because they are on the escarpment. The area is heavily faulted and so on, and falls of rock accidents would be very frequent there. You remember the Sabie Mine accident in the same area about 7-8 years ago. Now, the guys who are underground, who have been forced to go underground by guns, there's a clear indication that there's a syndicate that is operating on the surface that is, kidnapping and forcing people underground. And it's exactly the syndicate that we need to go after. We need to find out who are the guys with the guns who are taking people out of their communities and villages and so on, and forcing them to go underground to look for gold. The area is very close to the Mozambican border. It's a Shangaan area, so you would have people living on both sides of the border who are family members of one another. But also it's quite close to the Mozambican coast, for example, and so getting minerals out through the Mozambican border is actually quite easy. That area is looking a bit like the Wild West at the moment from everything that I've seen. We are sending monitors there. They are on their way as we speak, to find out exactly what is going on in that particular situation. But, like with Stilfontein, you can get the guys out from underground, but they won't tell you anything because they fear for their lives. And unless we actually deal with the people on the surface who have stepped in, because they control the flow of gold and so on, and unless we've got a centralized state buying agency for gold to which small-scale miners can sell their gold, these people, often they are from security companies, they've got guns, and they are able to actually intimidate people into these particular situations.
Yeah,
the country is awash with guns. We really, really need to take control of guns. We really need to have better gun control in this country at the moment. And we have tried in the past with amnesty for gun owners and so on, but very often we find the very guns that have been handed into the police end up also with syndicates, gangs, and traffickers and so on.
And David, how common is the story? Because you of course do work in this particular field just to see what exactly is going on there. So how common is the story that people are held at gunpoint and then forced to mine and go underground, against their permission and of course against their will, as their lives are now being put in danger? When you look at across the country, how common is this narrative?
Well, syndicates are very common across the country. We've seen them on Main Reef Road in the Johannesburg area. We've seen them on the Far West Rand and so on. The syndicates are a real big problem. We have also seen in the Springs area, for example, 18, 19 mine workers shot dead about 3-4 years ago next to the railway line there because they refused to cooperate with the syndicate. Very often people do go underground on their own cognizance and looking for a way to put food on the table and things like that. But it gets taken over by syndicates very fast because there is nowhere that the gold can flow into the system except through the syndicates. And this is why we need to really regulate this particular industry. Tell people where they may or may not go. Create conditions that are safe. Create a centralized buying agency that buys the gold, and that buying agency will not buy from syndicates but from cooperatives that are registered with the state and so on. We really need to hasten the process because otherwise we are heading for chaos. If you've got 6,000 abandoned mines, this particular problem is very, very common because the syndicates are starting to fight with each other to control shafts that have been abandoned and to control the populations around those shafts as well.
Now, as a final question, as you say, I mean, when you speak to the DMR, for example, we're in conversation with them just a few weeks ago, they talk about the fact that they cannot trace some of, the owners of the mine, and they've now taken it upon themselves to be able to try and close these shafts, albeit they do not have the money to be able to do this speedily. So, in the absence of funds, in the absence of the mining bosses who should be held to account, how long do you envision this process of open shafts to go on for?
Well, the problem is that the Department of Mineral Resources have got 50 billion rands for shaft closure, right? And the way in which they're closing shafts in the moment is completely ineffective. It is not actually keeping people out of those shafts. Also, they're not actually engaging with communities around the shafts to get community participation in both the rehabilitation as well as the securing of the situation. We need to begin to involve our people in the processes that we set in motion so that they can participate, so that you can cut costs, so that you can involve people and create opportunities for people to participate and make communities viable again. So long as we've got the current situation of poverty, of unemployment, of inequality, as well as the abandoned shafts and so on, and I don't believe that they can't find the owners. The fact of the matter is, before 1994, there was one or two major mining companies that owned all the mines, and they should be persecuted. I think that we should go to Lee Day in London and start some court actions against those one or two companies for the mess, because already one of them is being taken to court in Kabwe in Zambia for the mess they left behind there. And those companies were registered on the London Stock Exchange. It's very easy to take them to court there. If the South African government is unprepared to take these people to court here, maybe we should initiate a process of taking people to court in London. And that will be very embarrassing.
Yeah, let's see then what happens in that regard. But thank you so much, David, for your time. Appreciate it as this story continues then to develop. We do understand that this rescue mission has now been called off until tomorrow morning at 8. And this is due to safety concerns. You can imagine. You saw how dark it is there. They're using one rope. There's about 100 and odd of them now. At some point it was 106 and then one came above. You can then assume it's around 105 or so who still need to be rescued. And it's incredibly dark. Also, in some instances, language barriers there as well, persisting. So certainly, this is quite an intricate operation. The community that's around there as well, probably watching to see what happens now. And we do understand some of them were able to, be rescued, have now been taken into police custody in Mpumalanga. And as we there are watching this story for us.